I stood in the living room of the house I had helped save 3 times. Once during COVID, when both of my parents lost half of their retirement in the market, when my dad had back surgery and was unable to work for months, and last spring, when the furnace broke just before a cold snap and I sent the contractor the entire amount before they even called to inquire. I was only assisting Dad scan some documents for their health insurance that day. I wasn't there to correct anything. It was something I frequently did. Even after 10 years, my dad Gerald was still unable to figure out the printer-scanner combination. Even though I've spent more than 10 years working in project management rather than IT, he always claimed that I was tech-savvy. A pile of papers had been left on the dining table by him. I rapidly went through them, including a few utility bills, some Medicare forms, and medical documents. Then I noticed it. A folder with a milk hue. Dense. The estate plan final copy is neatly labeled in my mother's handwriting. It was wrong of me to open it. I am aware of that. However, I had recently paid $2, $178, Dodger, and $41 toward their property tax payment the week prior. And, as usual, I had intended to stop by the pharmacy after this to get their blood pressure refills. Yes, I did open it. 2 months ago, their will was notarized. They paid off their house in full. Their retirement funds that are still available. A policy of life insurance. To my brother, everything. Rivers. Mason. 29. No work. Still residing in the same house. He had left college early. Twice. Worked on music for a few years, largely by posting snippets that never received more than 200 views and jamming in the garage. He simply hadn't discovered his calling yet, according to my parents. Danielle Rivers, my name, came up once. Just one line. We trust our children to look out for one another, and we love them equally. That was it. The taxes I had paid were not mentioned. There was no mention of the savings I had moved without being questioned. No gratitude at all. It's just a kind way of saying that we owe you nothing and that you don't need anything. At first, I remained silent. Simply stood there with the scanner humming in the background, gazing at the paper. I had steady hands. I wasn't breathing. When my dad returned with his coffee, he asked, "Danny, are you making it through that stack?" I raised the folder. "Is it this way, Dad?" I said softly. "Mason, everything." Coffee halfway to his lips, he froze. He then let out one of those long, worn-out sighs that indicated he was already aware of what I had discovered. "It isn't what you believe." Since it was exactly what I thought, I didn't respond. I didn't immediately press him. Dad simply stood there with his coffee in his hand as if it would clarify something. "We figured you'd understand," he muttered. "Danielle, you're doing great. You've always performed admirably." When they didn't want to explain, they would invariably say that. "You've always performed admirably." In other words, you are unable to desire more. Leaving the folder on the table, I went outdoors to take a breather. When I sat down, the porch swing made a slight creaking sound. 2 summers ago, I had changed that swing myself. Mason claimed to be in between wages once more, so I hired a contractor to fix the deck railing that same week. I didn't mind at the time. I was brought up to be proactive and take charge. I was raised in the same home. Mason and I shared a room until I was 13, at which point Dad completed the basement. I can still clearly recall the day that Mason, Dad, and I painted the walls blue. "Look at our little team, some team," Mom exclaimed as she brought us lemonade. Mom said she couldn't sleep when I was too far away, so I stayed in Nashville after college. Even though a job in Boston offered me more money and a quicker path to leadership, I declined it. Family was more important, I persuaded myself. I was never asked to make a sacrifice by them. They simply never informed me that it wasn't necessary. Paying for their auto insurance when they were low on funds, purchasing food when the quick renewal was postponed, and contacting the credit card company when the late fees arose were all minor issues. Additionally, there were significant tasks like sending $11,000 from my savings to pay off the mortgage 4 years prior. I did it without hesitation. All I wanted was for them to feel secure and unconcerned. And suddenly I was a footnote, after everything else. I gazed at the ancient oak tree across the yard while perched on that porch swing. Once Mason engraved his initials on it. For a girl from his second high school, Mr. Plus HH. I wonder if he ever contributed to the cost of trimming that tree. After a storm almost split it in half last year, I wonder whether he even realized it cost $800. Did they ever consider what I sacrificed? Not only the cash, but also the convenience, tranquility, and life I could have created in another location. Or did they simply think that since I always arrived first and didn't walk back inside, I didn't need to be asked? Beneath me, the porch swing made a single creak before settling. Through the screen door, I could still hear the scanners hum. Mom came out a few minutes later. When she had to say something serious, she always wore the same light blue cardigan. Mason got her a burnt CD, and I gave her a gift card for Christmas. She claimed to adore both. At first, she stood there pulling the hem of her sleeve rather than sitting. "Danielle. Not too soft, not too sharp," she said. I didn't raise my eyes. Still, she sat next to me. "We didn't intend for you to learn that way." I gave one nod. I refused to fill her in on the quiet. She exhaled deeply. A relief, but not quite a sigh. "Not because we don't care about you." I remained silent, though. Because when it's inconvenient, what do you call love that forgets your name? She put her hand on mine as she reached across. She trembled a little, her skin heated. "Mason has experienced more hardship. Danny, you're steady. You were and always were. Steady, robust, and trustworthy." Kindness-inducing words that turn out to be bars. Labels that absolve you of responsibility. I withdrew my hand. I said, "You could have told me." Even my voice was low. "You had the option to inquire." She turned her gaze to the yard. That's when she finally said it. Softly, as though describing it as such made it lighter. "We were required to co-sign. Mason needs the assistance." The word came as a tap rather than a strike. However, I heard everything she said. I wasn't just left out of the will. They had already committed to him using actual numbers, debt, and danger. I inquired a lot, but got no response. "How much, Mom?" "Nothing has changed." Then, silently, 35. I got to my feet. The wind had increased. After a single clink, the ancient wind chime over the porch became motionless. I didn't stare at her with anger. Simply exhausted. He didn't need it, which is why you chose him. You already owed it to him, so you picked him. Her eyes grew wide, but I wasn't expecting a reaction. I simply didn't realize that forgetting me was part of the cost. I didn't send a text. I did not make a call. I simply quit. I canceled the automatic deposit I had put up for their utility bills the same week. I removed the calendar reminder to place a new order for their prescription drugs. The grocery account that delivers every Thursday at 4 was put on hold. No huge announcement, nothing dramatic. Just a silent shift, the place where I used to be, empty. I had hoped they would notice immediately, but a week went by. Nothing. I began receiving the first messages around the second week. First came Dad's text. "This month's water bill was greater than usual. Could you look into the account I didn't respond to? The low-sodium crackers you always bring are then gone, Mom." Mason failed to remember. I didn't read it. Not yet. They weren't worried. They simply thought I was occupied, irritable, or worn out from work. Perhaps they believed I needed room. Perhaps they assumed I would return as usual. The tone shifted in the third week. "The mortgages are due," wrote Danielle Mom. "Could you please send what you typically do?" She didn't greet me. Forgot to inquire how I was. Just a need, a line, a number, E. I spent a lot of time looking at the message. I typed, "Ask Mason," as it was now his house. I sent it without waiting. She called 5 minutes later. I allowed it to ring. Again, "Please don't act in this manner. We must speak." However, there was nothing further to discuss. They had already decided. I was at last living my life as if it were important. Mason added his voice that evening. "Don't worry about this, Danny. As always, just assist them. As usual." Similar to routine. Similar to a reflex. As if I were always just a trustworthy background sound. "You're the one they picked, Mason," I replied. "Thus, make the decision." He didn't respond. I awoke the following morning to a request for a transfer. Mom gave me $3 and $200. The precise amount of penalties and the past due mortgage. No note, no message. Only the number. I turned it down. The phone rang once more a minute later. However, then this. If you don't assist us, we might lose the house. Lastly, you would allow your parents to become homeless, according to Dad. It nearly made me chuckle. They didn't live on the streets. Simply put, they were uneasy. They were discovering what I had brought for the first time. Without asking, in silence, I switched off my phone. When they took me out of the will, they didn't lose me. When they thought I would continue to provide after that, they lost me. After I turned down the transfer request, there was silence for a week. No texts, no calls. I hadn't seen them so silent in a long time. And for some reason, that sounded louder than the cries. My quality of sleep improved. I woke up without looking at my phone, preparing food just for myself. But in my family, silence never endures. Not when someone has to assign responsibility. Aunt Laurie's voicemail was the first clue. She never phoned me very often and always claimed she didn't want to interfere with family matters. However, her message that morning stated, "Honey, I'm not picking sides. But your mother is quite anxious. Perhaps simply speak with them." I knew they had begun speaking at that point. To others. I looked at Facebook. Finding it didn't take long. A picture of the porch in front. "We gave everything to our children," the caption said. Giving, however, isn't always enough. Plenty of likes. Some worried remarks. Mason's family, according to some, is about money. They overlook the importance of turning up. I shut down the application. Hollow, not angry. They weren't only let down. The story was being rewritten, transforming me from caregiver to antagonist because I had ceased to be utilized. I received an envelope at my flat the following afternoon. Simple. No address for return. Copy alone. Inside a foreclosure notice. I knew the house number, but it wasn't addressed to me. For a while, I sat with it and gazed at the page. After that, I turned it over and scribbled on the reverse side. "Perhaps you ought to have left it to someone capable of handling it." It wasn't sent by me. I looked at the county website instead. Officially, their property was classified as endangered. Payments are past due. There is no more buffer. The savings had been depleted. Most likely attempting to maintain appearances. Perhaps I was expecting to give in before things became serious. Mason had used it all out. They gave him all of the money for stability, security, and his future. Lost. I would have intervened at one point. Made a bank call. Worked out a grace period. Transferred money. I poured myself a glass of water, though. Seated at the table in the kitchen. And without me, let the house fall. It's not always necessary to start the fire. All you need to do is quit carrying the water. It began modestly. Mom's ambiguous post including a sunflower emoji. A picture of her on the porch with her father, grinning. We loved them when we were raising them. We gave it our all. However, love is insufficient sometimes. No names. No outright charges. But I was aware of it. Anyone who knew us did too. "You two are such amazing parents," Aunt Trish said. "You're worthy of better." A day later, Dad came along. An extended post. Not as subtle. Our children received everything from us. Love, money, and time. We believed we had raised them correctly. Ultimately, though, you have no influence over who abandons you. I was tagged by him. No phone call. Not a message. Just a post that is visible to all. I didn't answer. I saw it develop. Plenty of likes. Some family friends who I hadn't seen since high school were joining in. "This generation simply does not understand sacrifice," someone wrote. Then there was Mason. Mason was there, of course. He added a caption of his own to Dad's post. "Only when they receive something do some people care. I would do anything to keep my parents safe." I suppose that's not how everyone views family. I read it twice. Then again, the same man who had spent all their remaining funds who had not paid rent in years, who had seen the house fall apart, was portraying himself as the hero. Even worse were the remarks. "What a wonderful son you are. Your sister ought to be embarrassed." They threw everything at her. All she wanted was more. Although they were unaware of the truth, they also did not want it. They desired a narrative. And they got one from my family. I could have remained silent. Give the storm time to pass. Then I discovered that she was my cousin, Kelly. The one who once informed me that you are the family's glue. She left a heart emoji since she enjoyed the post. Just that, no comment. It was more intense than I anticipated. Perhaps because I believed she was more knowledgeable. Perhaps because I believed she had noticed me. I sat in the dark with my laptop closed. And I felt something break for the first time in weeks. Not messy, not loud. One last, silent click. They weren't merely changing the narrative. I was being erased from it. On a Thursday, they arrived. It was to be anticipated. The texts had not been successful. The demands for funds had been disregarded. The guilt was no longer fresh. So they arrived. At 10:42 a.m., the front desk called. "Rivers, MS. Your parents are present. And a man who claims to be your sibling." As she spoke, I stood in the corridor outside my office, gazing at the floor tiles. They stated it was urgent and asked to come up. I inhaled deeply. Please let them know they're not expecting and that I'm not available. A pause. They promised to wait. Although no one could see, I nodded. Then give them permission. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. Mom texted. "We're on the lower level. Go ahead and open the door. One more. Until we speak with you, we won't be leaving." I took my time. After completing my current meeting and responding to 2 emails, I went downstairs. Standing too closely together, as if they had practiced, they were near the building entrance. Dad tensed up as if he were listening to a lecture. Mom's eyes scanned as she gripped her purse tightly with both hands. Mason appeared to prefer being somewhere else. When I walked through the door, they all turned. Nobody immediately spoke. I remained in my spot. Crossed arms. "Be calm," Danielle Mom said in an already tense tone. "We must speak." I gave her a quick glance before moving on. There was silence on the street. In the distance, a delivery van rumbled by. I didn't respond. Dad cleared his throat. "You would truly allow us to lose the house because of this?" I waited for the word. "Then you genuinely believed that I wouldn't." He started to speak, but I interrupted him. "You didn't include me. You gave Mason everything. You're here now requesting the same unquestioning support that I provided for years." Nobody answered. Mom moved forward, her voice now softer. "We assumed you would comprehend. You've been resilient all along." I gave a nod. "That was your justification for ignoring me." At last Mason muttered something. I completely missed the part about not requesting any of this. But I said, "You took it." He turned his head away. Dad's hands were now impatiently on his hips. "We reared you and fed you. You have a debt to us." It nearly made me chuckle. I made monthly and annual payments on that debt. "In any case, you deleted me." Mom's lip quivered. "We had no intention of hurting you." I moved closer. "So why didn't you see that I was the one securing everything until I vanished?" They remained silent. Mason's hand went to the door. I extended a hand. "Don't. You won't appear. You're not entering. This time, I won't be your response." No shouting, no commotion. Nothing but silence. There they stood. 3 individuals who used to identify as my family. And I had given up attempting to get noticed by those who only looked when they were in need. When they altered the will, I remained. When they thought I would never leave, they lost me. Their numbers were not blocked by me. I didn't have to. Anything they could yell back would be overpowered by the silence I offered them. They spent some time texting. Mom tried using gentle language. Dad became icier, accusing and demanding. Mason was largely silent. One final message. "Do you believe that this improves you?" Leaving. I didn't respond. I went for a walk a few days later. Just movement, no intention. Unintentionally, my route wound past the area where I was raised. The original street has the same appearance. The sidewalk is cracked. A fence that has been partially painted. However, there was a for sale sign on the lawn of the house. Shutters that have faded. Grass that is dying. I observed it while standing on the sidewalk. There was no light on the porch. I had corrected the swing, but it was gone. The hanging wind chime was the same. I didn't approach. I knew what had crumbled without having to look inside. I never stayed at that house. I held on to it. It was now someone else's issue. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I turned to go. Once. But then again. I didn't look at it. The name that will appear on the screen was already familiar to me. I let it to buzz. Then came to a standstill. Then it buzzed once again. I took the phone out and took a look. The call was missed. The call was missed. The voicemail follows. Realized I had muted the phone. I put it back in the pocket of my coat. No message is required. It would say something I already knew. It was a late autumn afternoon, and the air was sluggish and cool as I walked home. Not upset. Not proven right. Simply free. They never had me as a fallback option. They enjoyed acting as though I would never go. Simply leave a heart icon if they formally relied on your silence but couldn't remember your name. Some of us never spoke, but we also never vanished.